Scotch whisky is one of the most tightly regulated spirits on the planet, and if you're watching this, you probably already enjoy drinking it. But there is a difference between enjoying Scotch and actually understanding what you are drinking. These are 15 things you need to know about Scotch before you spend another $1 at the liquor store. Number 15. What legally makes Scotch Scotch? This sounds basic, but it is the foundation of everything else in this video. For a whiskey to be called Scotch, it has to meet a very specific set of legal requirements set by the Scotch Whisky Regulations of 2009. It must be produced at a distillery in Scotland from water and malted barley. It must be distilled at less than 94.8% alcohol by volume, so that the spirit retains flavour from the raw materials. It must be matured in oak casks no larger than 700 litres for a minimum of 3 years, and it must be bottled at no less than 40% alcohol by volume. The only things that can be added after distillation are water and plain caramel colouring. That is it. No flavouring, no sweeteners, no shortcuts. This is not the case with many other spirits, and that legal protection is a big part of why Scotch commands the prices it does. Number 14. Single malt does not mean what you think it means. This is the single biggest misconception in the whiskey world. When someone sees single malt on a label, they assume it came from one barrel, made in one batch, one specific moment in time. None of that is true. Single means one distillery. Malt means 100% malted barley. That is all it means. A single malt Scotch can contain whiskey from dozens, sometimes hundreds of different casks, all produced at the same distillery, but potentially spanning multiple years of production. The master blender at that distillery selects casks and blends them together to create a consistent flavour profile that matches what you expect from that brand every time you open a new bottle. So when you buy Glenlivet 12, you are not buying the contents of one cask. You are buying the distillery's signature flavour, carefully assembled from a selection of casks that were all aged at least 12 years. Number 13. There are 5 official categories of Scotch, not 2. Everyone knows single malt and blended Scotch. Those are the 2 categories that get all the attention. What most drinkers do not realise is that there are actually 5 legally defined categories. Single malt Scotch whisky, which we just covered, is made from malted barley at one distillery. Single grain Scotch whisky is made at one distillery but can use other grains like wheat or corn in addition to malted barley and is distilled in column stills rather than pot stills. Blended malt Scotch whisky, which used to be called vatted malt, is a blend of single malts from 2 or more different distilleries. Blended grain Scotch whisky is a blend of single grain whiskies from multiple distilleries. And blended Scotch whisky is a combination of 1 or more single malts with 1 or more single grain whiskies. Here is the part that surprises people. Blended Scotch accounts for over 90% of all Scotch sold worldwide. Single malt gets the headlines, but blends run the industry. Number 12. That number on the bottle is not what you think either. When you see 12 years on a Scotch bottle, it does not mean all the whiskey inside is exactly 12 years old. It means the youngest whiskey in that bottle spent at least 12 years in a cask. The rest could be significantly older. A bottle labelled 12 years could contain whiskey that is 15, 18, even 25 years old, blended together to hit the right flavour profile. Distilleries are not required to tell you the ages of the older components. They just cannot lie about the youngest one. This also explains no age statement bottles, often shortened to NAS. These Scotch releases have no age printed on the label, which means the distillery is not making any age guarantee beyond the legal minimum of 3 years. That does not automatically mean the whiskey is young or bad. It means the distillery wanted the freedom to blend casks of different ages without being locked into a number. Some NAS releases are excellent. Some are a way to sell younger stock at higher prices. The quality of the liquid in the glass is what matters, not the number on the box. And one more thing about age that catches people off guard. Unlike wine, whiskey does not continue to age once it is bottled. A 12-year-old Scotch that has been sitting unopened on a shelf since 1990 is still a 12-year-old Scotch. It is not a 47-year-old Scotch. The aging clock stops the moment the liquid leaves the cask. Number 11. 2% of all Scotch in Scotland vanishes every single year. There are roughly 22 million casks of Scotch maturing in warehouses across Scotland right now. To put that in perspective, Scotland has a population of about 5.5 million people. That is nearly 4 casks of whiskey for every man, woman, and child in the country. Roughly 38 bottles of Scotch are exported from Scotland every single second. And every year, about 2% of the liquid inside each cask evaporates through the wood and disappears into the air. Distillers call this the angel's share. Over time, that adds up to staggering volumes. By some estimates, over 100 million litres of whiskey evaporate across Scotland annually. That is around 44 Olympic swimming pools worth of Scotch just gone. For a 10-year-old cask, you are looking at roughly 20% of the original volume lost. For a 25-year-old cask, up to 40% or more of the original liquid may have evaporated. This is the single biggest reason why older Scotch costs exponentially more. You are not just paying for time, you are paying for everything that disappeared while you waited. A distillery cannot make more of a 30-year-old Scotch without waiting 30 years. And by the time those 3 decades pass, nearly half the original liquid is gone. That math drives the entire pricing structure of aged Scotch. Number 10. Chill filtration is silently changing the Scotch in your glass. Before bottling, the majority of Scotch goes through a process called chill filtration. The whiskey is cooled down to around 0 degrees Celsius and then pushed through a series of fine filters. This removes tiny particles of fatty acids and esters that would otherwise cause the whiskey to turn cloudy when chilled, or when you add water or ice. Sounds harmless, right? The problem is that those fatty acids and esters are not just visual noise. They carry flavour, they carry texture, they carry that oily, rich mouthfeel that makes a great Scotch linger on your palate. Chill filtration strips some of that out for purely cosmetic reasons, so the whiskey looks clear in the glass. Here is the rule of thumb. If a Scotch is bottled at 46% alcohol by volume or above, it almost certainly has not been chill filtered, because at that strength the cloudiness does not occur naturally. If it is bottled at 40% or 43%, it has almost certainly been chill filtered. When you see non-chill filtered on a label, the distillery is telling you they left the good stuff in. Number 9. That dark amber colour might be a lie. Scottish law allows distilleries to add one substance to Scotch beyond water. It is called spirit caramel, and it is listed as E150A on ingredient labels. It is a food-grade colorant that darkens the appearance of the whiskey without technically adding any flavour, at least not in the quantities used. Why would a distillery do this? Because consumers associate darker whiskey with older, richer, more premium whiskey. A pale, straw-coloured 12-year-old might taste incredible, but next to a deep amber competitor on the shelf, it looks less impressive. So many distilleries add caramel colouring to create visual consistency across batches and to make the whiskey look the part. The controversial part is that there is no legal requirement in most markets to disclose the use of caramel colouring on the label. If a bottle says natural colour on it, that means no caramel was added. If it does not say that, assume it probably was. Germany is one of the few markets that requires disclosure. Number 8. The cask does more than half the work. Estimates vary, but many experts in the industry believe that somewhere between 60 and 80% of a Scotch whisky's final flavour comes from the cask it matures in, not from the distillation itself. That means the type of wood and what that wood previously held are the most important factors in what ends up in your glass. Former bourbon barrels from American distilleries are the most commonly used casks in the Scotch industry. In fact, 9 out of every 10 casks maturing Scotch in Scotland right now originally held bourbon or Tennessee whiskey. The reason is simple. American law requires bourbon to be aged in brand new charred oak barrels. Once a barrel has been used for bourbon, it cannot be used again. That creates a massive surplus of high-quality used barrels that get shipped across the Atlantic to Scotland by the thousands every year. Without this single American law, Scotch whisky as we know it could not exist. Those ex-bourbon casks give the whisky notes of vanilla, honey, coconut, and butterscotch. Former sherry casks from Spain are the second most popular, and they deliver dried fruit, spice, dark chocolate, and sometimes a winey richness. Then there are finishing casks, where the whisky spends the last few months or years in a different type of barrel after its primary maturation. Port casks, rum casks, wine casks, cognac casks, even tequila barrels have been used. Each one adds its own layer of flavour on top of what the primary cask already built. Number 7. First fill and refill are not just marketing terms. When a cask is used for the very first time to age Scotch, it is a first fill cask. This is when the wood has the most flavour to give. The tannins, the sugars, the vanillin compounds, all of it is at maximum concentration. First fill bourbon casks deliver strong vanilla and caramel. First fill sherry casks deliver intense dried fruit and spice. After that first use, the cask becomes a refill cask. The second, third, and fourth fills extract less and less flavour from the wood each time. That does not make refill casks bad. Refill casks are actually preferred when the distillery wants the character of the spirit itself to shine through, rather than being dominated by wood influence. Think of it like a tea bag. The first cup is strong and bold. The second cup is lighter and lets the water's own character come through more. Many of the most respected entry-level scotches use refill casks because the distillery wants you to taste their house style, not just the barrel. Quick thing before we get to number 6 on this list. The data on this channel shows that over 80% of you watching right now are not subscribed. That means you are showing up for the content, but the algorithm has no reason to show you the next video. If you have made it this far, you clearly care about the stories behind great Scotch. Hit subscribe so you do not miss the next one. Number 6. Peat is not an ingredient, it is a process. Peat is partially decomposed plant material that has been compressed in boggy ground for thousands of years. In Scotch production, peat is burned during the malting process to dry out the wet barley before it is ground and mashed. The smoke from that peat fire infuses the barley with phenolic compounds that carry through fermentation, distillation, and aging. That is where the smoky, medicinal, sometimes campfire-like flavour comes from in peated Scotches. Not every Scotch is peated. In fact, the majority of Scotch produced in Scotland is completely unpeated. Speyside and Highland distilleries largely skip the peat entirely, producing lighter, fruitier, more approachable malts. Peated Scotch is most closely associated with Scotland's Whisky Islands and a handful of mainland distilleries that choose to work with it. The intensity of peat influence is measured in ppm, which means phenol parts per million, taken from the malted barley before distillation. A lightly peated Scotch might sit around 5 to 15 ppm. A classic peated Scotch from Scotland's famous Whisky Islands might hit 30 to 50 ppm, and the heaviest hitters can go above 80 ppm. Knowing the ppm level gives you a rough idea of how smoky a Scotch will be before you buy it. Number 5. How to read a Scotch label and know what you are buying. A Scotch label is trying to tell you a story, but you have to know the language. Here is what to look for. Start with the category. Is it single malt, blended malt, or blended Scotch? That tells you how it was made. Next, check the alcohol by volume. 40% is the legal minimum. 43% is common in the American market and in duty-free. 46% or above usually indicates non-chill filtered, meaning more flavour remains. Then look for age. If there is a number, it shows the minimum age of the youngest component. If there is no number, it is a no-age statement. Look for the words natural color on the label. If you see it, no caramel coloring was used. If you do not see it, caramel was likely added. Look for non-chill filtered. If it is there, the oils and esters were left in. If it is not mentioned, assume chill filtration happened. Finally, look at the cask type. Bourbon cask matured, sherry cask finished in port, whatever it says. That will tell you more about the flavor than almost anything else on the label. What is missing from a Scotch label tells you just as much as what is printed on it. Number 4. Cask strength is not a gimmick. It is a different experience entirely. When a distillery bottles a Scotch at cask strength, they are giving you the whiskey exactly as it comes out of the barrel, with no water added to lower the proof. That means you are typically looking at somewhere between 55 and 65% alcohol by volume, depending on how long it aged and what the conditions were in the warehouse. The advantage is control. Instead of the distillery deciding how much water to add, you get to dial in the exact strength you prefer. Start it neat. Add a few drops of water. Add a splash. Find the spot where it opens up for your palate. Every few drops of water change the character slightly, releasing different aromas and flavors. Cask strength scotches often deliver more texture and more complexity than their diluted counterparts. They also last longer in the bottle and give you more servings since you are adding your own water. Number 3. Adding water to Scotch is not a crime, it is chemistry. There is a persistent myth that real Scotch drinkers only drink it neat. That is nonsense. Adding water to Scotch is one of the oldest practices in the industry, and there is actual science behind why it works. Researchers at Linnaeus University in Sweden published a study in 2017 showing that ethanol molecules in whiskey tend to cluster together and can actually trap flavor compounds inside those clusters. When you add water, it disrupts those clusters and pushes flavor molecules like guaiacol toward the surface of the liquid where your nose can detect them. In plain language, a few drops of water literally release aromas and flavors that were locked up in the alcohol. Distillers and blenders at every major Scotch house taste their whiskey with water, typically diluting it down to around 20% alcohol by volume for professional nosing. If the people who make the stuff add water, you can too. Start by tasting it neat. Then add a few drops. Notice what changes. That process teaches your palate more than any video ever could. Number 2. Independent bottlers are the insider secret of Scotch. Here is something that changes the game for anyone building a Scotch collection. You do not have to buy Scotch from the distillery that made it. Independent bottlers are companies that purchase casks directly from distilleries and then bottle the whiskey under their own label, often with very different specifications than the distillery's official release. Gordon and MacPhail, founded in 1895, is one of the oldest and most respected. Signatory Vintage, Cadenheads, Berry Brothers and Rudd, Douglas Lang, and dozens of others operate in this space. Why does this matter? Because independent bottlings are frequently non-chill filtered, natural color, and bottled at higher alcohol by volume or cask strength. They often showcase a distillery's spirit in a way the official bottling does not, because the official bottling is designed for mass market consistency, while an independent bottling is designed to showcase a specific cask or small batch. You can sometimes find a single cask bottling from a famous distillery at a fraction of the price of that distillery's own premium range. If you have never explored independent bottlers, you have been shopping in one aisle of a very large store. Number 1. The only rule that actually matters. After everything in this video, after the legal definitions, the production secrets, the label decoding, and the tasting techniques, there is one thing that overrides all of it. Your palate is the only critic that matters. Scotch is not a competition. There is no prize for drinking the most expensive bottle or for having the most obscure taste. If you love a $25 blend more than a $200 single malt, that is not a failure of your palate. That is your palate doing exactly what it is supposed to do, telling you what you enjoy. Start with bottles you can afford. Try different regions, different cask types, different peat levels, different ages. Pay attention to what keeps you coming back. When you find it, go deeper into that style. That is how you build a collection that actually makes you happy, instead of one that just looks impressive on a shelf. The best Scotch in the world is the one you look forward to pouring. If this crash course changed how you think about Scotch, please subscribe. More videos like this are already in the pipeline and you will not want to miss them.